as the festive family gatherings and packed prayers that typically mark the holiday were scaled back or cancelled altogether. Pope Francis celebrating Mass in a near-empty Vatican service earlier in the evening, hours before a curfew went into effect in Italy. Hundreds of people in the U.S. could have the new coronavirus strain spreading rampantly across the United States. Moderna has said it expects that the immunity induced by its COVID-19 vaccine would be protective against the coronavirus variants reported in the United Kingdom. The variant known as B.1.1.7 believed to be 70% more contagious than the current strain circulating in the United States. And while the U.S. secured a deal with Pfizer for an additional 100 million doses of its COVID-19 vaccine yesterday, the cases of allergic reactions have reportedly prompted discussions between vaccine makers and the National Institutes of Health to run clinical trials in very allergic populations. New York City has introduced quarantine rules for international travelers following emergence of the new COVID variants in countries like the United Kingdom. And of course, the year hasn't been without its challenges. Over 320,000 people have died from complications due to COVID-19, according to data from the Johns Hopkins University. Businesses large and small have been decimated by the impact of the virus, hurting the economy with possible long-lasting effects. And as the nation grapples with the latest wave of coronavirus cases, California has borne the brunt of COVID-19's deadly holiday surge. And it is the 2 million mark that they have reached in the state. Dr. Anthony Fauci, director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases and the most prominent face of the Trump administration's response to the COVID-19 crisis, celebrates his 80th birthday today on Christmas Eve, and the mayor of Washington, D.C. has proclaimed it as Dr. Anthony Fauci Day in the nation's capital. A top public health official on the White House coronavirus task force has said she will retire after it emerged she hosted a holiday gathering. The 64-year-old Dr. Deborah Burke cited the criticism she had faced for a family get-together over Thanksgiving in Delaware as a decision to step aside. The U.S. stock market will close early at 1 o'clock today, and the bond market will close at 2 in observation of Christmas Eve. Both the stock and bond markets will close all day tomorrow for Christmas Day. President Trump vetoed the annual defense policy bill following through on threats to veto a measure that has broad bipartisan support in Congress and potentially setting up the first override vote of his presidency. As the House GOP a few minutes ago has rejected the $2,000 payments, leaving the future of the $900 billion stimulus package in doubt, as the president is jetting out to Florida for Christmas after this. And President Trump has announced yesterday 26 new pardons, including for longtime ally Roger Stone, former campaign chairman Paul Manafort, and White House senior advisor Jared Kushner's father, Charles. The United Nations Human Rights Office said it's deeply concerned by President Trump's pardons of 4 former government contractors convicted in the 2007 massacre in Baghdad that left more than a dozen Iraqi civilians dead. One by one, the flags belonging to a patchwork of armed forces were lowered in a northern Iraqi town once brutalized by the Islamic State group. The hoisting of the national flag in Sinjar, home to Iraqi's Yazidi religious minorities, the result of a deal months in the making for the federal government to restore order from a tangled web of paramilitaries who sowed chaos in the district during the Bedlam following liberation from IS 3 years ago. Iran's foreign minister dismissed President Trump's allegation that Iran was behind the recent rocket attack on the U.S. embassy in Baghdad, and Israel is working towards formalizing relations with a fifth Muslim country, possibly in Asia, during President Trump's term. The White House has brokered rapprochements between Israel and the UAE, Bahrain, Sudan, and Morocco this year. Rabat hosting an Israeli-U.S. delegation to flesh out the upgrade in relations. The U.S. has amassed naval forces with about 2,500 Marines aboard off the coast of Somalia to cover the withdrawal of the estimated 800 U.S. troops from the Horn of Africa, a country which has been hit by terror attacks from the Al-Shabaab insurgent group. And Ethiopian troops clashed with armed men involved in a deadly attack in the western Benishangul Gumuz region, killing 42 of them. About 20 African migrants were found dead today after their smuggling boat, which was trying to reach Europe, sank in the Mediterranean Sea, according to Tunisian authorities. The French government is fast-tracking almost 700 citizenship applications from foreign frontline workers who have distinguished themselves in the battle against COVID-19. And French President Emmanuel Macron no longer has virus symptoms and leaving isolation today after a week with COVID-19, but urging the French public to limit their contacts and remain vigilant to keep infections under control during the holidays. Gridlock at an English port kept thousands of truckers and travellers stranded, despite a deal with France to lift a 2-day blockade imposed because of a new variant of the coronavirus that had isolated Britain and raised fears of food shortages. Negotiators from the European Union and Britain working through the night and into Christmas Eve to put the finishing touches on a trade deal that should avert a chaotic economic break between the two sides next week. Almost 4 years of Brexit negotiations and Michael Barnier's famous clock still ticking as last-minute negotiations have some hours left to run. Boris Johnson expected to address the nation after signing the deal, but negotiators continue to haggle over mackerel and herring. Britain and the European Union on the cusp of striking a narrow trade deal today, swerving away from a chaotic finale to a Brexit split that has shaken the 70-year project to forge European unity from the ruins of World War II. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the World News on Radio Caravan. And Japan's highest court has upheld a ruling granting a retrial to a man described as the world's longest-serving death row inmate. He has lived under a death sentence for more than half a century. Singapore confirming its first case of the new coronavirus variant found in the UK, and China suspending direct flights to and from the UK indefinitely over fears of this new strain of the coronavirus. She leaves behind at least 150 descendants around the world, plus legions of fans and one doting zookeeper. Zinzing, the world's oldest giant panda and a matriarch extraordinaire, has died at the grand age of 38. The Chinese-born bear, one of the most famous of her species after giving birth to at least 10 cubs during her lifetime. As the political crisis in Nepal intensifies, the Chinese ambassador in Kathmandu has set tongues wagging that China could be making one final attempt to keep the flock of warring communist leaders together. The ambassador met Nepal's President Bhandari, who had lost no time in approving Prime Minister KP Oli's recommendation to dissolve parliament. India will not accept the proposal of Chinese military commanders to turn the 8 mountainous spurs jutting out of the Sirijap range into a no-troop area. And the controversial nomination of a Khalistan supporter of the House of Lords has been delayed and its announcement expected next month. The Union Agricultural Ministry wrote to farmers' unions once again inviting them for a 6th round of talks and dramatically upping the ante while rejecting the centre's proposals as meaningless amendments. Agitating farm unions said talks could restart only if a repeal of the 3 new agri-laws was on the agenda. Bharatiya Kisan Union moving the Supreme Court challenging the 3 new farm laws. Before submitting a memorandum of support to farmers' protests to President Ramnath Kovind, Congress leader and MP Shashi Tharoor said that President has an important moral role in guiding the government to take steps towards resolving the stalemate. Rahul Gandhi launching scathing attacks on Prime Minister Modi over the farmer protests. Maharashtra imposing a night curfew across all cities. And it is Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal saying the state machinery is ready to vaccinate people as soon as the vaccine gets approval. The ongoing trend of contraction in India's COVID-19 infections has led to shrinking of the share of active cases. And Prime Minister Modi, addressing Bengal's Vishwa Bharati University on its centenary day today, said its founder and Nobel laureate Rabindranath Tagore's vision was the essence of the Atmanirbhar Bharat, or a self-reliant India. The Congress formally approved its electoral alliance with left parties for the assembly elections in West Bengal, and Prime Minister Modi virtually inaugurating the Kochi-Mangaluru's GAIL pipeline. We also have an election billed as a straight contest between the People's Alliance for Gupkar Declaration and the BJP. A strange Mehbooba Mufti acolyte with a 9-month-old party has emerged as the unlikely kingmaker, shepherding a clutch of independence to form semi-rural Srinagar's first district development council. The BCCI's governing body ratified the entry of 2 new franchises in the IPL to make it a 10-team affair from 2022. As Australia opener David Warner will miss the second test against India this week because he left a biosecure bubble to receive treatment for a groin injury. Cricket Australia said Melbourne has been placed on standby to host the 3rd test between India and Australia if Sydney's COVID-19 situation gets worse. Federal Minister for Inter-Provisional Coordination Dr. Fahmida Mirza met javelin thrower Arshad Nadeem, Pakistan's leading prospect in the Tokyo Olympics, in her office and assured him full support for his training. Video footage has emerged of Taliban Deputy Leader Abdul Ghani Baradar acknowledging that the group makes all decisions related to the Afghan peace talks after consulting its leadership and clerics council based in Pakistan. And Federal Minister for Railways has said that Prime Minister Imran Khan will sign an agreement for a trilateral railway project connecting Pakistan with Afghanistan and Uzbekistan. And the Sindh High Court set aside the provincial government's detention orders for 4 men set free around 8 months ago by the order of the SHC in the abduction and murder case of U.S. journalist Daniel Pearl. And that's all.